mysteriously outlying region. So I hope you're all doing well. Thanks again. Even at the time that you asked me to speak at this meeting, I was busy working on a paper about accommodating gender and disability in security management. So without thinking about it, I said, yeah, inclusive security. Sort of, my mind was going that way. So here we are with inclusive security, which is really the generic consideration of women, gender, disability, inclusion in the bigger sense, in a holistic security approach. Now, we all understand the importance of a holistic approach in security. Physical security, and with that I mean gates and perimeter structures, burglar bars, and lights and stuff, means absolutely nothing as a standalone discipline. Without a trained guard force, a dedicated guard force, disciplined one, it doesn't work. Guards need SOPs. It needs to be supplemented by electronic safety and security systems. And this indeed brings a whole new different dimension to it, because these systems often run on the networks supported by our IT security colleagues. On their side, they have an even bigger issue with cybersecurity challenges that come their way. And then we have ongoing assessments, because we need to inform those who need to make decisions. They have to have good information to make their decisions. We reach out to the safety folks and the fleet managers about our vehicles, road safety, protection of our assets, tracking them, looking at how we can train drivers to reduce the incidence of road traffic accidents, which in turn has the impact of a loss of an asset, the issue of dealing with injuries, downtime of staff because of injuries, the cost, etc., etc. And then we have fire safety, we have medical response, all of these in the bigger scheme of a holistic safety and security approach. Now, we cannot isolate any of these and expect them to run effectively. Now, I was very happy to see that the word holistic appears 160 times if you do the search in ASIS online, which was great. That showed, well, hey, there's something about this that's right. And it really richly adds to some of the big topics of the day, like enterprise security risk management and various other processes. Holistic is the adjective derived from the word holism. And I was quite surprised to learn, and Wikipedia, thank you, reminded me that it was a term that was first coined by General Jan Smuts. Can you believe it? Here we have the South African ASIS, and the term is derived from one of the big generals and statesmen of the day, General Jan Smuts. He wrote a book, Holism and Evolution, which was published in 1926. Now, his thinking around this topic was obviously much more in the line of the philosophy. Holism is derived again from the Greek word holos, which means all, entire, or whole. You'll find references to this in the psychology as well, but of course, we're not going into that. These days, the most popular use of the word holistic really is found in the medical science, where it means looking at or considering the whole person, including their mental and social factors, rather than focusing on the physical health side of it only. In this instance, a holistic approach focuses on a person's wellness. In our holistic approach to security, which, I mean, it's as multifaceted and multidimensional as a disco ball, right? All these little things that reflect off, but they all form the one unit. And we see a common element among all of these different facets of security, and that is people. Whether they are the enablers, whether they are the adversaries, whether they the obstructors or the do-gooders, they are integral to this whole concept. And I think you get where I'm heading to at this point. We have people, we have wholeness, we have wellness. And we are really looking for well-being in action here. And in this time of COVID, we hear a lot about well-being. We are, I mean, every day there are articles and webinars and all kinds of things about wellness. And in our industry, how it affects us as individuals, how it affects our teams. And there's just about a daily webinar that you can attend to see how can I reach out to my teams and ensure that they are well. Because this is dragging on for a long time and we've seen the impact of that. So security is a deeply personal and a subjective concept. We face persistent threats and attacks which impact us and on our physical and psychological lives. These are often also affecting our friends, our colleagues, our families, our beneficiaries, our clients. And taking an organized approach to this insecurity can help us sustain ourselves and sustain our work. It starts with having a culture of security. We want everyone, from the cleaner to the managing director, to support security. We want them to embrace it. We want them to take it seriously, participate in it, join us in ensuring that our security is effective and efficient. But it starts with us, with every individual, having a sensitivity to ourselves, but also to everybody around us in the workplace. A culture of security is only possible if there is a healthy atmosphere. People's perceptions and understandings are different. And we have to be aware of what these are. And we have to build in the needed checks and balances to neutralize barriers and create a common cause as it relates to security. At the foundation of it is you, me, us, right? Each of us also come with our own issues and baggage and stuff. So I will touch on a few things that we individually, and irrespective of where we stand on the ladder within the organization, what we can do, and this would really only be a matter of scratching the surface, right? Because this is such a deep and intense subject. How can we consider people as a facet of a holistic security approach? A wider, inclusive approach without straying too far from what we published about gender and disability, right? So setting the stage for an inclusive workplace means that and this really goes hand in hand with the holistic approach in security. In our professional relationships, we have to create a safe environment where confidentiality is key, where people know that they will be dealt with respect, dignity. But they have autonomy about this process too, because it can be a sensitive issue. There's also the principle of non-discrimination, the impartial treatment of everybody. So this is the milieu that we have to create as security practitioners to ensure that we can not only establish, but maintain and hopefully improve the culture of security in our various environments where we work, in the small unit up to the big organization. Once we've established this environment, we can start focusing on various elements of diversity, which includes, but are not limited to, gender, disability. And when it comes to disability, I would like to point out that there is no fixed definition for disability. The UN's Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and Optional Protocol states that it is an evolving concept, and it results from the interaction between people with impairments and attitudinal and environmental barriers that hinders full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. That's a wide topic. It includes those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, and sensory impairments, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full participation in society on an equal basis. So this is an incredibly wide range of people. And I think in general, we think about people in wheelchairs, we think about people with hearing or visual impairment, and it goes so much wider. It includes people who suffer PTSD. It includes people who suffer mental conditions, be it temporary or permanent. So that really opens this field incredibly broadly, and many of these things we don't even know about. And we probably will never know about it unless there's a disclosure from the person that's affected. Now, that's a long story, but hopefully it will start making sense as we go along. Other issues of diversity, race, which is one of the ones that's very, very prominent at the moment all over the world. Culture, religion, age. Yeah, we look at the group here, we run the gamut, right? And there's a lot of discrimination about age. Looking at a job or a person who applied for a position. Too old. No. There's only 2 years left for this one to work. No, I don't want to make an investment in a person who can be here only for 2 years, right? Age is a discrimination factor, and age is one of the issues of diversity that we need to think about. Are they parents? Yeah. Language, nationality, experience, skills. These are all elements that we need to consider when we talk about inclusion. Now, companies and organizations can set goals, they can establish rules, and they can make, noble statements of intent, and they can provide opportunities for employment, but that does not necessarily bring about real inclusivity. Unless we as individuals start with ourselves, unless we are aware of how others are feeling, unless we are aware of our own biases and our own background and how it influences our behavior towards others, it cannot work. In other words, it enables or prevents us from being inclusive in our attitude, in our language, our actions. There is no set of rules or a corporate statement that will have the impact that every individual's contribution is in this process. It will be just a hollow sounding drum. It will be words, no action, no results from that. It needs substance. So what can you and I do in this regard? And a lot really comes down to our own biases, our lack of awareness of it. And in no specific order, are we profiling? And it goes way beyond the understanding of the word profiling in the sense of surveillance, right? Are we treating younger people with an attitude of, what do you know? You have a long way to go. You need to get some experience before you can start speaking up, before you can be considered for X, Y, or Z position. Similarly, for thinking old people, no, time to retire and make time and, vacate that seat for the younger crowd that's up and coming. They're ready. They're ready to take it over. Your immediate dislike when meeting somebody of a particular look, a redhead, for instance, because you had a bad experience at school with a redhead that kept bullying you. So now you have that barrier in front of you every time you meet somebody who reminds you of that individual. It happens. Are we sensitive to how our society, in the workplace and in the community, are treating newcomers or outsiders? And I'll get to that in a little bit again. Be aware of people's conditions at home, their family situation. Do they have elderly parents at home that maybe not be doing well? Do they have a family member with a physical or a mental condition that may impact on your colleagues' time and focus from time to time? Do they have special needs children? How does that impact people's situation at the office? It might be that a person has an abusive spouse or a partner that whole issue of domestic violence. Are we aware of it? Are we sensitive to the signs of this happening? And please, domestic violence is not something that only affects women. It affects all gender. And I think in many cases, domestic abuse towards men are even swept more under the carpet than that of women, because they're too ashamed to talk about it. They don't want to acknowledge this. Right? Are you noticing people's changing behavior? They're more reserved, withdrawn. Are there signs of depression? Please don't ignore this. This is critical. This is critical. The fact that we have to be open and aware to changes in people's behavior. Sometimes it's small and subtle. But the one who used to be the chatty person around the water cooler or at tea time takes their tea and they go back to their office. And it's not because there's an important job to be done. Be aware of these things, please. What should we be advocating for? And what can we do? Include back to the newcomers to the society or the community or the workplace. Include in new arrivals briefings, for instance, especially those people who come from out of town, people from a different country. Information about local security, cultural issues in the case of expats. And culture is a whole different kettle of fish. It's worth a week of discussion, all the elements of culture and how it impacts on people's personal security. Be conscious of how their nationality can impact their security in this particular community. Think about conditions that people may be suffering of. Something like albinism. We have seen in so many parts of the world, and especially on our continent, how people with albinism are targeted just for who they are. They need to be aware of it if they come into, if you bring them as an employer into a new community, you need to be aware of the consequences. How are you going to also assist that person to live a safe and secure life? About culture again, dress code. What is acceptable around here? You know, it may vary from this part of the country to another one, but it can have a very particular security implication. How are people of other gender orientation accepted in society? There are countries in my region, and I'm sure you know of similar situations where it is against the law to be gay or lesbian or trans. They end up being arrested, put in jail, and facing the most horrible conditions and torture because of who they are. We as security professionals must be aware of these situations. We have to be aware of what is the accepted norm and warn people about it. They may be new into the society. They are transferred here by your organization. And somewhere along the line, there was a disconnect in the decision. Or the organization did not know about it, which of course is a whole, it's a different discussion. Should people consider newcomers specific security measures in their residences? A lot of you on this call are from South Africa. I would certainly say, you know, if you have newcomers, especially expats arriving in country, you want to give them a good briefing on how to secure their residences, how to behave just in general when driving, when walking in the street, etc., because of specific localized situations, right? Physical security elements, safety and emergency procedures as it comes to people with disabilities. We have to be honest and realistic about accessibility, physical accessibility. We want to support, and we have to support, engaging people with disabilities in our industry, and there are opportunities for that. But when HR comes to you and say, we have, or management comes to you and say, we have a person who is wheelchair bound, how will that work in this office? You have to be aware of the basic size or space requirements to turn a wheelchair around. Door hardware to enable people to open a door. How difficult is it to open a door? There are very, very specific specifications and detailed really to an amazing level of granularity of what these specifications are. So please be realistic, because if you say yes, just to be accommodating, it can have a safety implication down the line. There may be a fire, there may be some other emergency, and you realize that you never thought about evacuating that individual from the office, for whatever the reason may be. Now, I see a lot of opportunity for people who are wheelchair bound or who have other mobility challenges within security. CCTV operators. I mean, in the UK, the police have shown the absolute value of engaging officers who were injured on duty and are now wheelchair bound or lost a leg. They can't, they cannot be working out in the field anymore, but they have amazing experience. And behind that CCTV screen, they are able to identify situations that's developing and guide the people in the field how to act and where to go. Radio operators, dispatchers, there's a lot of, especially in bigger organizations, opportunity for desk-bound positions within security that can be done by people with mobility problems. On the sensory side, ensure that your fire alarm systems accommodate both people with hearing and visual disabilities or impairment. So often we only have alarms that sound, but we do not have the flashing lights to warn those with hearing impairment. Ensure that these devices are also in your back of house facilities, in the toilets, so that people can be warned in time. Ensure that your emergency procedures include a buddy system and more than one buddy for every person with a disability, so that they have somebody that will assist them when, hopefully it will never happen, but in case of an emergency and you need to evacuate. If you have somebody with low vision, he or she can go around in the office very easily. They can work very effectively as long as the light is bright enough. But when you go into your emergency stairs and your emergency lights are the only ones that's working because the generator didn't kick in and there's an electricity failure, so it's only the battery operated light that works, I hope. You have to have a buddy for this person with low vision because they need light, bright light, in order to see. If they don't have bright light, they have to have somebody to put a hand on his shoulder and go down those stairs. So the whole issue of inclusivity for people with disabilities is incredibly wide. And I really urge you to go check out the local legislation. And if there are none, look at the American Act the American Disabilities Act. That is something that often is the foundation that other countries build their legislation and specifications around. Parents. Even if you don't have children, or you're like me, forgotten about what it was like, right? How can we accommodate people who are parents, especially those with young children? It's a big thing, I know, but establishing childcare facilities. Now that brings a very, very pertinent security challenges to us. If you have a childcare facility on your compound or in your compound, the potential of a parent that's been left out coming there, the potential of just incidents developing security, safety issues with young children. Once that walk away, they're not being observed closely enough, and it's one of those little investigators, and they start wandering off, and suddenly you have a missing child. Very, very important things that we have to keep in mind as well, but it's also a very important inclusivity element in our workplace, because it will ensure that parents are more at ease. They can focus being productive because they know their children are being taken care of. Something else that definitely was not in fashion in my time, but you have lactating mothers in your office. Do you have facilities where they can pump breast milk? Do you have facilities where the childminder can bring the child to be breastfed? Big thing, a big challenge. But there are ways of getting around this. There are ways of, but it's important to think about it, right? And the whole issue around children applies to both parents. A dad may request to be released from office early today because he has to fetch the kids from the creche because his wife is working a night shift. We have to also ensure that we mainstream the whole thing of inclusive parenting, right? That we support that concept. Transportation is another one. Given the security situation, how can we facilitate a safe commute for our people? Are we even aware of the conditions under which they are traveling to and from the office? Depending on the location, and maybe I'm not exactly sure where all of you, which parts of the world you all cover, but I have countries in my region where it is a security issue to give a car to a woman to drive. She will end up in jail. And I'm not talking about Saudi Arabia. She will end up literally with threats to her life. So be aware of that. We should also be careful of that careful balance of giving people opportunity, applying our thinking from our cultural perspective. I have to be able to do everything my husband or my male colleague can do, right? Some places that has a security implication. Can women sit next to the driver in the front of the vehicle? Some places that can cause a big issue. So important, again, we get back to the cultural side of this, important to keep that in mind. Related to transportation, travel security. Big topic. Eva, you and I were part of a paper, was it last year? And it was really interesting to see how, the various elements in this. How are we preparing people for business travel? What systems have you put in place to ensure that the hotel reservation has been made in a place that is safe and secure for your employee to travel to? What about the time that the flight arrives on the other side at the destination? Is it safe for a lone woman traveler to hail a taxi and go to the hotel? Should the organization be thinking about paying that little bit extra and ensuring that the hotel sends a vehicle or a car to pick up that lady at the airport? And maybe it's not only applicable to women only. Maybe it means we should be thinking about arrival of flights at a certain, have a cut-off time and say, you know what, we'll pay more and have people arrive during daylight hours, because after hours, crime in that place is a nightmare. We cannot allow people to travel. Hours of work, speaking of daylight hours. Accommodating the need to let people leave office maybe a bit earlier, especially in winter when it becomes dark very early, that they can leave early to arrive home at a decent hour, that they can still commute safely. Also, something like having a floating guard that can accompany personnel from the office to the parking area. On this, parking areas, parking garages, think about the perception that your staff are having of this situation. I had an interesting situation in Geneva, of all places. Geneva is a decent place, right? It's a place with low crime. Crime is really far and few between. And I went on mission there, and people at the office were saying, oh my goodness, you know, we are fearful going to our cars at night. Now, for crying out loud, your car is parked right below this building in the parking garage. What's wrong with you? So they said, but it's dark. So I took the time and I went downstairs into the parking garage. And I found that it was cave-like. It was dark and miserable. Lighting was not adequate. So the car is parked in the far end of the parking garage. And for anybody who's, you know, doesn't walk around whistling with a torch in the hand and, you know, ready to defend themselves, they find this a fearful experience every day to go to their car. Solution is easy. Improve the lighting. And we see this where when we build a new place, when you start negotiating with the architect and with the guy who holds the, well, the person, let's put it right there, the person who holds the purse strings, when you say, you know what, I think you should paint the inside of this parking garage, because psychologically, people will feel safer. And that takes a bit of convincing sometimes to do, huh? But that's part of also creating a safe space. It's part of creating an environment where your people feel safe and secure. A stupid thing. But it's going to cost a couple of 100 liters of paint to do that. And it needs to be redone in a few years. But it works. Mind over matter in this regard. What are people's conditions at home? Do you know? What does the neighborhood look like where they live? If you're in an area that's susceptible to storms and flooding and other natural disasters, how can you support personnel to be more resilient, to be able to deal with the weather emergency better? If there's an issue with the electricity, yes or no? Don't go there, right? Are we looking at supporting our personnel with maybe a solar solution? Light is an important thing, as I alluded to with my garage, the parking garage example. Light is a very important thing in the perception of feeling safe and secure. If you have a solar system that at least, or panel, does not have to be a big extensive system and, you know, run all the ACs and things like that. No, we want something that can provide light. It's important for adults. It's even more important for children. Also, the facility to ensure that the cell phone is charged so that your advisories can reach them, that they can contact you. That connectivity is directly connected to electricity. It is directly connected to the area where these people are living, also to their resilience at home, their preparedness. And we can do a lot by simply sharing information about this. And resilience at home will also mean less absence from work, a better productivity, a better overall atmosphere, and a happy team. So I just want to share a few images with you on the next topic. Confront your own biases. When you do a PowerPoint presentation, how do you project the manager when it comes to race, when it comes to disability, when it comes to gender? And yeah, we have colleagues from Kenya here. I found this one in LinkedIn, and just as I was preparing images for this presentation, and I thought, yeah, that's very true. So often, if you are talking about management training, we have all the power entrapments of a male manager there, right? Cufflinks, good watch. That's the guy. But that course can just as well be taken by Victoria, right? Because that's what you do. How are we portraying criminals? Are they people of color? Are they always men? Are they women? How biased are we when we think about employing people who have tattoos? Hey, you're going to have a difficult time if you want to employ chefs, because that's a trade where tattoos part of the image, right? Is it that this man in the middle with a gray beard and a tattoo is no longer acceptable to your company image? Same with the people here in the left. We have, and maybe the younger generation has gone through that already, but my generation still see people with tattoos as bad people. They're criminals. And yes, we do have, talking to a good South African audience here too, you have a big issue with gang violence, and tattoos is very much part of that culture. But should we apply that to everybody that we see? Here's the question. The parenting, moms and dads, right? So you may ask, but how do all of these things relate to a holistic perspective of security? Now, let me take you back to the concept of wholeness. It relates to the wellness of people. And people, I hope you'll agree with me, form the glue of our security ecosystem. They make it whole. All these elements that I've just touched on, and as I said, this is really just scratching the surface. All these elements contribute to the wellness of people and to us. And it's the concept of being respected. It's the concept of my needs being considered. And of course, one has to have that caveat, you are going to find the individuals that are going to take a ride on this and gonna try and push this as far as they possibly can to do as little as possible and get as much as possible, right? Yes, we do. We see that, we experience it. There's the need for people to be valued, the need to be trusted, taken care of. And this all works into a positive work environment, which in turn is the fertile soil for us to cultivate a culture of security. It means a stronger team. It means a more resilient workforce. None of this will happen by itself. You and your team will have to actively engage people. You have to build bridges, establish a relationship of trust. In this whole process, it speaks for itself that your collaboration with HR is key. It is also very important to have an atmosphere where you can collaborate and engage with personnel, where you can get their opinions, because if it's not collaborative, your ability to get buy-in will be limited. Buy-in means that you will have adherence to specific policies and procedures. If you don't have that buy-in, and that comes with the atmosphere that you create or help create, you're not going to establish a culture of security. A culture of security and an effective and properly functioning, integrated, or a holistic security operation cannot be based on a rule of, because I say so. I'm the security professional, and I say this is the rule, and just do it. That's not going to get you by, right? If you have to be able to justify things. The only time that we do not debate about do it is when the stuff has hit the fan. When there's an emergency, there's a line of communication, there's a line of decision, and bus, it happens. But beyond that, we should allow for some discussion to take place and ensure that we have an engaged audience in our personnel, whether they're security or whether they're finance or whether they're the cleaners or the maintenance guys. We have to bring all of them on board in order to create our culture of security so that they will take it seriously, that they will come to you and say, you know what, I identified a gap here or there. I don't think this thing is working properly because of this and that. But they will only have that ability to speak to you if you open the door for it. So to close the loop, time is running, to close the loop on the holistic nature of security. Every element of it includes or contributes to the wholeness of it, the holistic approach. If it doesn't consider people, our structure is broken. If we don't have a relationship to build around, our strategy will fail. So create a culture of respect that will nurture a culture of security. Small gestures make a big difference. That hand on the shoulder, are you okay today? Makes a big difference. Kind words can go a long way to smooth the difficult path, especially in the current circumstances that we are in. And communicate. And communicate is a two-way street, right? Listen, share. So that's it from me. If you're interested in this topic, quite coincidentally, there's a webinar this afternoon on diversity and inclusion by the Perpetuity Research Foundation. And they will be talking about what makes a truly diverse and inclusive security workforce and a lot of other issues. So without further ado, thank you very much, Eva, for the opportunity, and over to you.